Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an NPC bodybuilder. Today's guest is Matt Burzacott. Matt, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Hey, buddy. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing awesome, dude. I'm super excited to chop it up with you. Just two Iowa boys that are going to have an awesome conversation about life and bodybuilding. So I kind of like to start each podcast off, Matt, by asking my guests, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
That's easy for me. My favorite bodybuilder of all time, physique-wise, is Kevin Levrone. And I even make a joke about it. Everybody knows, or I don't know, everybody knows, but anybody that sees my pictures knows I tore my pec. That's all they talk about, blah, blah, blah. And I even make a joke to say I tore mine just so I could be just like Kevin Levrone. So he's my favorite physique-wise, and he was just had this mystique about him that was just like, he was just cool, and he looked athletic, and like just like his style, like he was just a really cool dude, it seems like. And other than him, personality-wise, like bodybuilders that I know, definitely Jay Cutler. Jay, actually, I met when I was 20 years old, right after Teenage Nationals, and he was always super nice to me. And he even went as far as getting me the first contract I ever had with Muscle Tech, way back then, 16 years ago. And to this day, he still remembers me. So he's definitely up there as far as just as a person. And then lastly, the guy behind you, Dorian. Just because it's so cool how he, the shadow and how he would disappear, and his entire mentality, obviously his training intensity and just the way he did things was so intense. And he also figured this all out on his own. He didn't really have, I think he had somebody, I can't remember the guy's name, but he had somebody that he kind of went to ask questions a little bit, but he didn't have a coach. He just did his own thing. He logged everything. And just the mystique, how he would just show up to the Olympia every year, kick everybody's ass, and then go back overseas and disappear for another year was just so cool. So those are my top three of all time.
Love it, man. So I'm going to ask you this because you're so deep into bodybuilding. You're obviously around current IFBB pros, some of the best of the best. But who are some of the guys like currently competing in the IFBB, Matt, that you just really respect their physique, or you respect the way they carry themselves, just kind of like you talked about your all-time favorite bodybuilders?
Well, obviously I'm down here at Revive in Florida, which has become, I don't know if you want to say the new Mecca, but it's like, it's pretty close. So I'd be silly to not say, Nick Walker, who I've become, very, very close with. Obviously Chris Bumstead is here now, who, I've gotten to know pretty well. Ian Valliere, him and I hit it off. We're very, very similar personality wise. And we'll get into some stuff about that later, just kind of our personalities. But Bret Wilkin, obviously, who I actually have known since he was a kid. He's from Des Moines as well, went to the same high school as me. He's in my younger brother's grade. So to watch what he's done, man, it's the craziest transformation I've ever seen in my life. And anybody that knows Bret knows that he is just, nobody has a bad thing to say about Bret Wilkin. And the guy just works and works and works and doesn't ask questions. And he just gets it done. So to see him doing well is absolutely awesome. Other than that, man, those are really the main guys I talk to here. I don't really have anybody else currently that I'm like. One guy actually that I can think of who hasn't competed in a long time, who I love his physique, is Sas Haradi. I don't know if that's how you say his last name. He's been missing a long time. I've always loved his physique. He's coming back. I like Hunter. I like Hunter Labrada. Get along well with him. Like all of these like younger new guys that are coming up, I get along with and like them a lot. But those are the main guys that come to mind.
Love it, man. Bret definitely is representing Iowa well, right?
Yeah, I mean, for a while, I was the best bodybuilder to come out of there, which I still haven't turned pro yet, which we'll get into. But man, he just got launched. I mean, he's doing the Arnold. Obviously, we can talk about now, but to see him, he has a good possibility to win. And if he can beat Brandon at the Arnold, and Brandon's currently second in the world, I mean, what's that tell you? So, and he has a chance to do it. I've been seeing obviously his updates and his pictures, and I wouldn't be surprised if he beats him. I'll just say that. So,
yeah, no, that Arnold lineup, I was just actually looking at it earlier today. It's legit, man. It's going to be an exciting show for sure. So,
yeah.
Let's, I want to ask you kind of the second question, Matt, that I ask all my guests just to kind of start off the conversation. Tell us at what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
I started at 12, but I wanted to start earlier. Like I started asking my mom if I could lift weights when I was like 8 or 9, probably. And I think it came from, I was a big like WWF wrestling fan. It's WWE, but I still say WWF. And the Ultimate Warrior, I was obsessed with. Hulk Hogan, obviously. And then I remember, I don't know if you remember, like, I think it was called Cops. It was like a cartoon. It was just like all the people were muscular in it. And I was just obsessed with muscles, even when I was a kid. And then I started playing football. And I was a really, really skinny kid, like scrawny, like got made fun of. I was so skinny. So obviously I was self-conscious about it and had this, insecurity about my body from a young age, which I think anybody that gets into bodybuilding probably does. And I think that's kind of how most of us, if not all of us, get into it, because we have some kind of issue with how we look, obviously, and that gives us the security we need. And hopefully you grow out of that and realize as you get older that that's not all you have to offer the world. But for me now, it's become, I don't really want to call it a sport, but I guess just a way of life and part of how you live. And you do love the competition aspect of it, challenging yourself. And as far as like when sports got over, it was just a natural progression for me because I didn't know what to do with myself when football ended. But I started lifting when I was 12. I finally convinced my mom, or I think the doctor, said, because back then they still had that myth that it would stunt your growth and whatnot. So my doctor finally let my mom, or told my mom it was okay. Like once I was 12, I was in 7th grade and I got a Weider weight bench for Christmas. It was either Christmas or my birthday, and put that in the basement. And I get home from school and go down and, you do the same thing every day, bench press, curls, no legs. I don't think I did anything else other than bench press and curls and maybe some triceps, but I did that for a while and then joined my first gym when I was, I think maybe 14, a couple of years later. And then when I was 15, I made a friend in high school that read like Flex magazine and stuff. And he's the one that introduced me into more of, how to train the other body parts and train legs and stuff like that. And then from there, I really just took off and I grew really easy, even though I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I got strong really easy and got muscular and stayed super lean, obviously, because I was skinny. So that's how I got into it.
Perfect. So before we kind of get into all things bodybuilding, because I know, like you said just a little bit ago, you competed in team nationals, but before we kind of get there, obviously you grew up in Iowa, where I grew up, not the same place, but the same state. But talk about those younger years, Matt. I know family is something that's very important to you, but talk about, football, talk about the other sports that you played, talk about some of those family dynamics up to about high school, and then we'll move on from there.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up, my parents were just like regular middle class. My dad's a fireman in Des Moines. My mom was the secretary at the elementary school I went to. So I could never really get in trouble. I wasn't anyways. I was a good student and a good kid, and got good grades and was always involved. Baseball was actually my main sport at that age. I didn't start playing football until 7th grade because Iowa was a little behind. They've got tackle football now for kids, but when we were kids, we didn't have tackle football. It was all flag.
Yeah.
You couldn't play tackle until junior high. So baseball was my main sport, and that's what I was really good at. I was obsessed with baseball and little league. And man, I even remember telling my dad when I was little, like, I really think, I was like, I don't know if I can make the major leagues, like, because I was a Cubs fan. I'm like, I don't know if I can play for the Chicago Cubs, but maybe the Iowa Cubs, if I try my hardest, so I was obsessed with baseball. And I remember always being like, man, Dad, I wish we played 162 games like the MLB. And, I remember him being like, I don't. So I just could never get enough baseball, man. And I was actually better at that than football. And then, high school came along, and, football obviously is a bigger deal than baseball once you're in high school. And I just kind of fell in love with that.
So what actual town in Iowa are you from, and did you go to school in high school, Matt?
So I grew up in Pleasant Hill, like Altoona area, and I went to Southeast Polk High School, which we've had a couple. Kyle Orton came from there. He was my quarterback. He was 2 years older than me. He went on to play at Purdue, and then played for the Broncos for a while, and or the Bears, and then the Broncos, and had a pretty good NFL career. We've had a couple other Division I guys that were pretty good, but we were mostly a wrestling school when I was there. And actually they finally just won their first state championship this year. But when I was there, we were okay at football. We were always like on the brink, of making the playoffs or winning the conference. But we were actually a really good wrestling school, but I just wasn't really into wrestling because I was always obsessed with gaining weight. And at the time, you don't really know. All you see is your friends that are wrestlers that are always losing weight and suffering and all this stuff. And I'm like, that just doesn't seem like, that doesn't really interest me. I'd rather gain weight and get strong and hit people. So I never really got into wrestling.
Me neither, man. I looking back, I kind of wish that my parents would have encouraged me, or I would have gotten to wrestling, because I think it's a great sport, especially for young boys. But I never got into it and kind of got consumed by football, kind of like you did. Now, talk to me a little bit more about your parents and kind of their influence, Matt, because again, I know that family is very important to you, but what did your parents kind of instill in you? Was it kind of that work ethic? Is there something that they kind of told you when you were growing up that kind of still you carry with you at this age? What was that main influence of your parents?
So my parents didn't really ever talk to, it was not really a spoken thing. It was more of an observation. So my dad is, I can talk about my dad for hours, but my dad is the most caring, giving, just takes care of everybody, man. And he always, he, as a fireman in Iowa, you work 24 hours on and you have 48 hours off. So he would work at the fire station, and then on his days off, he had another job. And, I still, like, to give you an example, I was back home, and my dad still drives a 2003 Acura SUV. Okay. Like, he can afford it. He can get a truck if he wants, but he just doesn't, because he'd rather spend money on us and my mom and, and whatever. So that's just kind of how he is. The only reason he has clothes that are new is because we buy them for him. The guy just was always working. If he's at home, he doesn't sit down. He's always doing projects around the house. And in a way, I wish that he would have pushed us more. My dad was always like the guy that he'd rather just do things himself than ask anybody to do anything for him. And that's including my brother and I. So I don't want to say we grew up lazy. That's definitely not it. But I think it would have been helpful had he, looking back, pushed us more. I think he was maybe too easy on us. He also wanted to make sure that we never grew up arrogant or cocky. And I think that's where I think people always, one thing they notice is, I guess, just maybe how humble I am, or maybe I'm too humble is what a lot of people say. And that's where that comes from, because he never wanted us to think we were better than anybody. He always made sure we knew that no matter where we went, there was someone better than us. But for me, I think that kind of hindered my confidence a little bit. I was confident. I knew I was pretty good at sports and whatever it was that I was doing, but I didn't ever really have like that killer instinct, like maybe I wish I would have had, that a lot of champions have. And so that's kind of how I grew up. And my mom was, my mom's more of like, the social, funny person. So she didn't, she's a mom. She wasn't really like, she doesn't know how to, she just enjoyed watching sports and, being there for other things, talking about girls or girlfriends and stuff like that. So that's kind of my family dynamic. I don't remember what else you asked.
No, I just kind of just asked like what influence your parents had. So you that covered it well. Talk to me a little bit. Was there a coach or a teacher or any other kind of adult figure when you were younger, Matt, that looking back, you kind of feel like they had a really big impact on your life when you're younger?
What's weird is no. And so like, even in football, I kind of got like the motivation from myself. I don't really know where it came from. So I started training when I was 12 because I was skinny and I was obsessed with not being skinny. And coaches saw that. And I went into high school like 125 pounds maybe as a freshman, and didn't even play on, like, I played football as a freshman, but I didn't even like barely play because I was just too small. And by my sophomore year, then I started my sophomore year, I was like 160 pounds. And then I remember we had a lift-a-thon. And this is why I'm so big. Another thing I'm passionate about is helping kids and getting them into training and strength and conditioning. I had a gym for a short time where that's all I did. And I was a strength coach for a short time at a high school. And I really love that. That's something I really want to get back into because it's a very powerful thing. I'm big on the weight room because I was athletic, obviously, but my body wasn't where it needed to be to actually see the field. So I literally in 1 year or 2 years built a body that was actually big enough to actually be able to play. So I went from not playing at all to starting varsity, to being, captain my senior year and, a pretty good football player. And I did that through the weight room. If I didn't go to the weight room, I would have never played. And with kids that I see today or that I used to coach, I would tell them that, and, how important that was. So that's why I'm such a big believer in the weight room and everything that instilled in me. But I think coaches saw that and they just kind of like left me alone. I wish they would have pushed me harder. Like I was that guy that would go to practice and like pushed everybody else. And then they just left me alone. Like I didn't get coached at all, hardly. So looking back, that's another thing. Like I wish I would have. The only person I've ever had as a coach that's actually pushed me is just like recently with Matt Jansen, who's also, my best friend now. That's the only coach I've ever had that has pushed me. And I'm just now 36 years old.
Right.
Oh
yeah, no, that's interesting. Now, before we kind of move on from the childhood stuff, I want to ask you, because it's obviously sentimental to me. It's important to me. Like growing up in Iowa, right? Like you're, what did you say? You're 36?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm 34. So we're right around the same age, right?
Yeah.
But like I know you said that you used to live out in Denver for a short time. I've lived in Denver. I lived in Detroit. I've lived in Des Moines, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Like for how young I am. And I think the same with you, Matt, like we've lived a lot of life in a short amount of time. We've lived in big cities. We lived in small towns. We've experienced a lot of different, experiences, but there is something unique and special about growing up in Iowa. There's something unique and special about growing up in the Midwest. It's different. And it's hard for me to explain on a podcast to somebody watching this or listening to this, what it is like growing up in the Midwest, because you kind of have to experience it just like you have to experience growing up in a city, what have you. Right. But what was it like for you kind of growing up in the Midwest, growing up in Iowa, and having that experience as a young kid? And now comparing it to like, living in Florida, living in Denver, living in some of the other cities and states that you've lived in.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the best way to sum it up is this. If there's anybody that watches college football and watches like the University of Iowa, what they're have gotten most famous for recently, I feel like, is the wave. When at the end of the first quarter, when everybody, for people that are watching that have no idea what I'm talking about, they built a children's hospital right next to Kinnick Stadium. So kids that are terminally ill or, you know, going through some serious things can sit there and watch the football game. And at the end of the first quarter, everybody in the stadium, players, fans, even the opposing team, will turn and wave to these kids. And I think that's the best way to sum it up. People in Iowa, in the Midwest in general, they just give a shit about other people for the most part, way more so than anywhere else I've ever lived. And, you know, in a way it's burned me a couple times, because I think that we take everything, and obviously there's exceptions. Not everybody from the Midwest is a good person, but for the most part, I think we take what everyone says at face value, and, you know, we just look for the best in everybody and assume everybody's good. And I think that's a good thing. But like I said, I've been burned a couple times because of it, but I'd rather be burned than be the one that's, you know, an asshole. So that's kind of been my experience. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten better. And actually yesterday we were upstairs we have an office, Revive and everything. And Chris Bumstead, being from Canada, mentioned kind of a similar thing. And he said that the 4 months he's been here, he's just realized how different people are, because from where he's from, he's like, people are just so nice. And, you know, I think that's why he's so popular, because what you see is what you get from him on his Instagram and social media. He's real. He's just a nice, normal person. And he said, moving down here, it's just, you have to be careful with, you know, who you become close with and who you let in your life. And that's one thing I've really gotten a lot better at, is, you know, setting boundaries and not allowing everybody to be my friend, or not everybody. I don't have to be everybody's friend. I can be friendly, but that doesn't mean that, you know, that we're necessarily friends. So whereas growing up in Iowa, you know, you think everybody's good and you want to be friends with everybody. So I think, is that kind of what you feel too?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the kind of like the example you gave with the Iowa Hawkeyes, Kinnick Stadium, and the hospital, what always I kind of share with people is like, okay, in Iowa, especially like now you grew up kind of in the Des Moines area, so it's a little bit different, but I'm grew up in a town of less than 5,000 people, very rural, very farming. But like you'll be driving in Iowa or anywhere in the Midwest, kind of the smaller town areas, and literally like you'll just be driving and somebody will just like, you know, like usually it's a farmer person or more of a country person, but they'll wave at you, right?
Yeah.
They'll just kind of give you like one of these little fingers. Well, that's what you get in the Midwest. Well, you start going to the cities or other places, like you get the middle finger, right? When you're driving. So that's kind of like that's kind of a quick little picture that I always say is like, when you're in the Midwest, when you're in Iowa, you get the pointer finger on the steering wheel, a little wave. You get the middle finger when you get to the bigger cities and different places of the country and the world. But yeah, man, it's just, you know, when I've lived in different places like Denver or Detroit, if I say I'm from Iowa or the Midwest, like, oh, those are good, hardworking people. Like that's generally what other people in different parts of the state say about Iowa or the Midwest. And like you said, like that's a generalization, but that's something I'm always proud of that we're known for, is like good people and hardworking. Cause like you said, we've lived in different places and that's not the reality in other places. Right. So,
when I tell people where I'm from Iowa, and they're always just like, ew. And I'm like, no, like it's a great place to live. If you've ever been there, you would love it. Like, well, maybe not, maybe they might not love it, but I love it. And I'm proud to be from Iowa.
For sure. No, it's a great state, man. And it's pretty cool that we have that in common. So let's start talking a little bit about bodybuilding. So you started lifting weights at 12. You kind of got into the strength training more for sports and stuff. Now talk to us about actually competing, because you competed as a teenager. how did you actually get into bodybuilding, the sport or the competing? And then talk about your first competition, Matt.
So I told you about my friend that was reading Flex. That got me into starting. Then I got a subscription to Flex because I was just looking at these guys like, whoa, like they don't even look real, you know? And so I started reading magazines, and then back then, I don't know if they still do it. I don't even think Flex exists, but they, Flex magazine every year used to fly out the winner of the Teenage Nationals to Gold's Gym Venice back then. And they would train with Charles Glass, and they would meet, you know, whoever. It was usually like Chris Cormier or, you know, someone like that out there, and they'd hang out for a day and they'd do a big article on them. And I was just like, wow, like that is so cool. So when I was 17, I graduated high school when I was 17 because I'm a July birthday. You know, so I was young, and I was like, man, I think by the time I'm 18 or 19, I could probably win this thing because I saw what the guys looked like. And so I did it the first time when I was 18. I did my first show when I was 18. I had no idea what was going on. I had a guy from Kansas City that was helping me that was kind of knew what he was doing because the owner of my gym knew him. So he got me in touch with him. And so he helped me for the show. It's not like prep nowadays, how there's coaches now. It was just kind of like we did it. I went and saw him in person. He'd write it on a piece of paper. We'd talk on the phone like the old days. I'd go and see him like a couple weeks later. Like I was driving to Kansas City a lot to see him in person like every other week. And I remember I only prepped for 10 weeks. I remember this. I remember going to meet the guy, and I thought I looked good for being 18, but I didn't really know. And I took my shirt off, and I weighed, I think I weighed 210 pounds. Okay. And he looked at me and he said, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, I told him Pleasant Hill. And he's like, "You're about to put Pleasant Hill, Iowa on the map." And I'm like, whoa, really? So I ended up doing my first show. I did the Missouri State Championships. It's Chad Nichols' show. And it was a really, really good show back then. I mean, like back then it was 2004. There was only men's bodybuilding, women's bodybuilding, fitness, and figure. There might even have been figure actually. And the guest posers at that show were Ronnie Coleman, Chris Cormier, Nasser El Sambadi, and Matt Duvall.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, the crowd, like it was nuts. Like my mom still has the VHS. And like in my teenage class, you know, there was like 10 of us, like in the teenage class. And I came out and like, because it was on VHS, it was so cool. Like the place just was like, what, that kid's a teenager. And my mom, like my parents had no idea what was going on. You hear my mom, like my mom hears them saying like, what the heck? And my mom's like, "That's my son. He's good." And they're like, yeah, what have you been feeding him? Like, where's he from? Iowa. And like, oh, that makes sense. Like, so these people are just freaking out. And, you know, obviously I dominated the show. And then I won the novice class against like adults. I didn't do the open because I didn't think, you know, I wouldn't have won the open, but I would have done really well. I weighed in. So I started my diet at 210. This will give you an idea of how lean I was. And I came into the show and like, I didn't know the weight classes or anything. I just went and weighed in, and I weighed in at exactly 198 just by chance, which is the very top of light heavyweights. So it didn't matter for teenagers because we were all in one class, but the novice, you know, I was a light heavyweight and I won that, and I won the overall. So from there, so Teenage Nationals was 1 week after that. And I thought like, I was like going to steamroll everyone because I just had this boost of confidence. I had like Nasser, like I actually met Nasser prior to that. That's a different cool story. But Nasser was backstage and he knew who I was. And Matt Duvall was like, "You're the best teenager I've ever seen." And I'm just like, my head's just like pumped, right? So I go to Teenage Nationals the next week and I end up getting fourth. And I was, you know, like, whoa. Jason Huh won that show. A lot of people will know who that is. And Steve Kukla won the heavyweights. Jason Huh won the light heavyweights and the overall. But I still had another year. I was only 18. So, you know, Jason was 19, almost 20. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to come back next year and win. So trained for a year. Still, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have a coach at all that the whole off season. Came back and kind of just remembered what that guy had me do the previous year, and then just kind of, did that. And then I came back and I weighed like 210. And that's when, that class was kind of famous back then as a teenage class. It was Steve Kuklo beat me by 1 point. I was second. And then a guy named Trey Brewer, who a lot of people that have been around a long time will know, he got third. So it was a pretty freaky teenage class. And, I remember back then, like bodybuilding.com was huge, and I blew up on there. And then my email was just going insane. And so I was, supposed to be pretty good. And, from there, I don't know where you want me to take it from there, but that's kind of how that started.
Okay, perfect. So before we continue in that direction, you graduate high school, you're already a successful bodybuilder, teenage bodybuilder. Once you were in high school, Matt, what were you thinking about what you want to do career-wise? And then once you graduated, what did you do? Or did you just kind of fully get consumed in bodybuilding and move that direction? Talk about post-high school for us.
Okay, so in high school, so I'm a really good artist. I can draw really good. That was one of my hobbies, just like pencil drawing. So I always thought, like, naturally, I was like, oh, I'll do something with that. Like, graphic design back then was very popular. And that's what I always thought I was going to do. I didn't really think anything further than that until my senior year, when I actually had to make the decision of like what I was going to do. There was this art school in Omaha that I was maybe looking at going to. Luckily, they came to my school and they, gave you an idea of what it was like to be a graphic designer, and you did everything on the computer. And I really wasn't creative in a sense of like creating logos and stuff like that. I could just look at something and draw it. So I was like, wow, shit, I don't think I'd be any good at this. It's all on a computer, first of all. And second of all, I'm not creative. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm interested in the body, maybe physical therapy. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. All I knew is I love bodybuilding and I love training. And I actually was a personal trainer like right out of high school, just because I had read so much. I remember the owner of the gym came up to me and said, just randomly, like, hey, what are the 3 branched chain amino acids? And I was just like, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And he's like, do you want to work here? And I was like, okay. So, I got certified and I was a trainer, and I was just going to community college in case I wanted to become, a physical therapist. And so, I did my gen eds while being a trainer. And then when I was kind of done with gen eds, I was just kind of like, I don't really know that I just don't really see myself doing that, like working with mostly with old people and stuff. Looking back, like nowadays, I probably would have gone the physical therapy route, because there's so many cool different avenues you can go with that now. People like, I think he's a chiropractor, but like Jordan Shallow, and there's different people that are physical therapists that kind of use that knowledge and use it into the bodybuilding realm nowadays. But back then, that wasn't really a thing. So I just kind of got fully immersed with bodybuilding, training people. Once I realized I wasn't back then, I wasn't, the way it was set up, I wasn't really making that much money training people, and the gym actually ended up closing. So then I thought, okay, well, I'm just, my dad's a fireman, my grandpa was a fireman, my uncle was a policeman. So it was like, all right, I'm going to either be a fireman or a policeman, but you needed to be 21 to do both. So I was just kind of waiting, and whichever one I got on first, I was going to go with that. And the first thing I got on was Polk County, the sheriff's office. But you started in the jail. And so I worked in the jail, and I worked like midnight to 8 a.m, days off, Monday and Tuesday. Can you see me?
I can't see it. No.
I got a phone call.
That's okay. You're good. You're good. I can see it now.
Okay. So I got on with that, and I hated it, man. Like it was like being in jail. At that time, I think I was 23, and still, bodybuilding and stuff. But so I actually ended up quitting that, and I naturally got into banking or unnaturally, I don't know. I think 9 out of 10 people in Des Moines work for Wells Fargo. So I got sucked into the corporate Wells Fargo world because I was like, man, I want to do something where I make money, but I have a good schedule and I sit at it's something bodybuilding friendly. So I started working there at a lower job, like doing like loan modifications, customer service type stuff. And I worked my way up to being a loan officer. So I did that for like 7 or 8 years. And then, naturally I started coaching people on the side in like 2009 because people started asking me for help. So that's kind of where those days, what I was doing.
Perfect. Didn't Bret Wilkin before him and Ivana moved out to Denver? Wasn't he working for like Wells Fargo or some sort of bank?
We were doing the same exact department. I saw him every day. Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it. So good. Actually, one of my best friend from high school, he's down there in Des Moines, and I think he works for Wells Fargo. So us Iowa boys will understand what we're talking about. Nobody else probably will, but it's all good. So
yeah.
All right. So let's so you had quick success, early success in terms of teen bodybuilding. After like that first competition or first couple competitions, Matt, did you know that bodybuilding was something that you wanted to pursue? And if so, how early on in the bodybuilding experience for you personally, did you want to become an IFBB pro, or was that not even something you thought about immediately?
No, I thought my goal was to be at the Olympia by 25. And I had people telling me let's go back to, I was 19. I did the Teenage Nationals. Then I met Jay Cutler. He saw my pictures. He got me a contract with Muscle Tech. I was an Ed Connors boy. A lot of people will know who Ed Connors is from back then. Ed Connors owned Gold's Gym corporate. So him and 2 other guys owned Gold's Gym. And Ed was known for, anyone you could think of in the 90s and 2000s that was really good. What he did was, anybody that he saw that had talent, he would kind of just take care of them, and you could live in one of his houses in Gold's in Venice, and he called them house guests, and you'd basically just be a bodybuilder. And he invited me out there to go to check that out. I didn't like the idea of depending on someone else. It made me feel uncomfortable. So I didn't end up doing that, but he did introduce me to Jay, and then Jay got me the contract and everything. So I thought like, okay, I'm on my way. Well, the day after my 21st birthday, I go to train chest. And of course, back then it was bench press, everything. And that's when I tore my pec. And I'll say this on here, that my pec tear was the worst possible pec tear you can have. So when you tear, this is what nobody understands, and it drives me crazy. Okay, a tendon connects muscle to bone. Okay, so normally when you tear a pec or whatever, you tear the tendon off the bone. That's 99% of the time, probably. I tore the whole muscle belly. So the tendon ripped out of my chest. So it's like a bomb went off in my chest. So that's why I'm missing like the outer third of my pec. So everyone is always like, well, why don't you get it fixed? Why don't you get it fixed? It is fixed. It's just, it blew up. The surgeon had to take the tendon. It was shredded. He had to wrap medical tape around it and then sew that back into my chest, which he said was like sewing it back into raw hamburger meat. So that's what happened with that. So after that happened, I was just kind of like, man, I don't know. I don't think, that was obviously, I was devastated because I was like, I thought my dream was over. And so I continued training and competing, but like in the back of my mind, I knew that it was going to be really hard for me to ever do really well. So I didn't really go all in. So I kind of just like from 22 to 26 kind of floated around and like dabbled around with like national shows, but got my ass kicked because I wasn't really trying that hard. And then, around that time I was like, if I'm going to do this, I may as well like really try and see what happens, And then, that's when I finally started trying like really hard. Like 2010 is I actually started like doing what I was supposed to be doing.
Right. So when you had that pec tear, and then you had that time period where you kind of like you said, you didn't go all in, you were just kind of dabbling. What did that do to you mentally? I mean, was that something that you really struggled with in terms of like, you're this, everybody's talking about you and had this early success and I'm going to be a pro by the age 25, then you have the pec tear. I mean, what did that do inside of you? And what did that do to you mentally, Matt?
I wouldn't say it destroyed me, but it basically, I mean, I was depressed. We'll get into that later, but I mean, not as depressed as I was later in my 20s, but it definitely affected me. It definitely took away like the swagger that I had and confidence that I had for sure. Like, it was like, because then it was like, oh, you're a really good bodybuilder, but only for that pec, and that's all I heard and that's all I saw as well. And it's like, it definitely affected me. So just in my day to day, it kind of just took away my confidence and my overall swagger as like a bodybuilder for sure. But I wasn't, for whatever reason, man, I didn't quit. I don't know why. Like, I think 99% of people would have just quit, because I get a message every day from somebody saying, hey man, I tore my pec, like, and they quit, but you make me feel like I still maybe have a chance. I don't know why I didn't quit. I think it makes sense looking back now. At the time, I don't know why I didn't quit. I probably should have and gone a different route in my life, but I didn't. But like I said, it all makes, where I am now, looking back, it makes sense.
For sure. So talk to us then about 2010. You said 2010 is kind of when you had your resurgence. You kind of said, hey, if I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do it. Talk about what that kind of looked like practically. Did you kind of like go out and get yourself a great coach? What kind of changed? What kind of shifted in 2010?
Yeah. So yeah, I did. I got a coach. I got Don Long was my first coach, and he really showed me, because I still I had an idea what to do, but I didn't know what it was like to really be like a real bodybuilder. So he showed me kind of what it was like food wise, and supplement wise and stuff like that, to be a bodybuilder. And I went and did junior nationals. And back then, junior nationals was really tough. The guys that would win juniors, you wouldn't do nationals unless you did well at junior nationals back then. So, that was like when Phil Heath was winning. He won it, and that's where he started. Michael Lockett. So if you won junior nationals, it was a big deal. If you got top 5 at junior nationals, it was a big deal. So 2010, Don coached me, and I got 5th. And that's the moment where I realized, like, shit, okay, like maybe I can do this. And then I went on, I did the USA's that year because he wanted me to just, because I wasn't fully in shape, and USA's was 6 weeks later. So he's like, let's just, see what happens. And I got 15th, but there was like 40 guys in my class. So to me, that was another big win. I'm like, okay, I placed, because they only placed 15 people. And I'm like, let's really see what we can do. So 2012 rolls around. So a couple years later, I go back to junior nationals, and that was really the breakout. I got 2nd, and I lost to a guy named Anthony Pasquale that was an amazing bodybuilder. He ended up, stopping competing, but he won the overall easily. He was just like he was a guy that would have been like probably a top 6 Olympian had he continued, if he wanted to. So the fact that if you take him out of that show, I would have won the overall in, 2012 junior nationals. And me looking at that was like, okay, yeah, let's do this. So then I came back in 2013 and did the USA's, and that was my first 2nd place. I was just wanting to be like top 5 was my goal. And I ended up getting 2nd. And obviously then you go and get 2nd. It's like, all right. Then I knew, like, all right, I can do this. And then that's when things in my personal life got hairy. And I don't know what you want to go into now, but that's kind of where we're at.
Let's go into it, man. I want you to talk about that, because that's going to lead into some other deeper stuff that I just want you to really share with everybody, man. Because I know you've shared some of it a little bit on your Instagram, but whatever you want to share, I want to hear it, man. Because this is the real life stuff, man. And This is the stuff that impacts people. So whatever you want to share, let's talk about it, Matt.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to preface this by saying I'm not sharing this like to be looked at like a victim. I'm not sharing this to smear people. I'm simply sharing it because what happened to me was, I'm just as responsible because I chose to stay in it, but also what happened to me, I think it happens to a lot of people. And it's more so not what happened to me is what I want to focus on. It's more so, I think that depression and anxiety is the more that you're open about it and the more people you talk to, the more you realize everyone goes through it almost. And that's mostly why I want to share it is I think people can relate. And, I made it through it. And I think that had I had somebody to talk to that had been through it and let me know like, hey man, this is what you need to do. It would have been very helpful. Instead, I just kind of went through it on my own and didn't really talk about it. So I met a girl and I think this is extremely common, men and women. I think you don't really realize how important your significant other is, how important of a role that plays in your life until you go through something like this and look back at it. So up to that point, I was, I had girlfriends and stuff, but I would say I was probably the selfish one, that the reason why those relationships didn't work out, because I was just more worried about myself. And then I met, my kryptonite, I guess. I met someone that I was just like, like when you're a kid and you see that pretty girl and you're just like blown away and you fall in love at first sight, like that's what it was. And man, I love this girl. It was the first person that I like put before myself. And it just came to happen at a time, it just happened to be at a time where I, looking back, probably should have been selfish because I just got second at the USAs. I'm finally, maybe going to fulfill this dream of mine that I've had since I was a teenager. So I meet this girl, I do 2014 USAs, and it just, like I said, I don't want to smear her, but she made things very difficult for me. And I'm a empathetic person. So I chose to understand her, why she was the way she was versus like, you're just, fucking crazy, get out of my life. And I also, I was in love with her. So I chose to stay through it all. And, when I say she made things difficult, I mean, like, just, it got to the point, the reason I'm going to share this part of it is because I think people that are in a relationship like this don't realize what's going on, because I didn't. It was the first time I'd experienced something like that. And it's, someone that has a lot of issues in their own head, that is insecure, that is very toxic and abusive mentally and physically. And they try to keep you in a cage, and they manipulate, and they do it in a way that you don't even know what's happening. And before you know it, you're not talking to your friends, you're not talking to your family, you're not working, you're not doing anything other than trying to make them happy to avoid a fight every day. And I did that for about 4 years. So I tried to do the 2014 USAs, but and I'm the type of person that if my significant other, if they're like not okay, I'm not okay. I can't just be like, yeah, fuck it, I got to go to the gym. I got a show to get ready for. It impacts me. Like if they're not okay, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing or should be doing. So I tried to do the USAs in 2014. I was the favorite to win, and it was just obviously not a good prep. I wasn't, I was missing meals, I was missing the gym, whatever. I ended up getting 6th place. So after that, man, things just kept getting worse and worse with her. And it got to the point where you're like, well, okay, to avoid these fights, it was always over, I was always getting accused of, talking to other girls and whatever, other girls this, other girls that, when I wasn't, going through my phone constantly. It got to the point where we couldn't even go in public because I'd get accused of, looking at a girl or sleeping with this girl, and I wouldn't even know who the person was. So it got to the point where I'm like, okay, let me just stop bodybuilding. Oh, okay, let me just not have Instagram. Okay, let me not have Facebook. Let me just stop doing everything to avoid these confrontations if that's what you need. It was always, if you would only do this, then I wouldn't be this way, right? And, I'm like, okay. So it got to the point where 2015, I basically stopped bodybuilding and I was a normal person to try to make her happy. So 2015 didn't compete, 2016 didn't compete, 2017 rolls around. Okay. And I'm finally to the point where I'm like, this isn't how I should be living my life. And I'm fed up with this. And like, this is not okay. And once I made that decision, I had removed her from living with me. She was off living somewhere else. And, I'm at work one day at Wells Fargo and I get a text from her and it's a picture of a positive pregnancy test. And I'm just like, whoa. And I'm going to skip a lot of this because it's just, I don't think, important to talk about, but long story short, she ends up moving away back to where she's from, because I had thought that she was just saying that so I would take her back. And I kind of called her bluff on it. And it turned out, obviously being true. She was pregnant with twins. And so I ended up moving out to where she had moved back to, obviously I wanted to be there for all that. Because like you said, to me, having a family is the most important thing that you could have in life, and being a father. And, I wanted to be there obviously for all that. And I just, basically sacked up and was like, if this is going to be the rest of my life, this is going to be the rest of my life. Now, with that being said, she had moved out there. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to make one last run at this bodybuilding because I got to get this done. Like, this is unfinished business that I'm not going to, like, I had made the choice. Like, if I have kids, I'm not going to be a bodybuilder, nothing against anybody that has kids and that is a bodybuilder. For me, I couldn't do it. So I'm like, let's make one last run at this thing. She's not here currently, so I can just focus on this. And, I decided to do the USAs. I kind of pulled a Kevin Levrone and went from a normal person to just a prep. And, long story short, I do the show. I get second place again. And then to make it even worse, I lose by 1 point to Patrick Moore. Obviously another phenomenal bodybuilder. So it's like these people I'm always losing to are like just incredible bodybuilders. And, I remember at the time, I'm just like, man, like, this is how it ends for me. After the show, I lost by 1 point. I went into my hotel room, didn't even turn the lights on, got in the shower, and I just bawled. I just cried, for 10 minutes, just like, this is how this end, something that is that important to me, bodybuilding. This is how it ends for me, and this is it. And fast forward, I move, and the babies are born November 1st, 2017. And because of what things that I had picked up on the previous 4 years, I had told her, I'm going to DNA test these kids from the beginning. And she's like, okay, yeah. So I did. And November 10th, 2017, the DNA test came back and they weren't mine. And, there's two ways to look at this. People that aren't involved, that have never been through something like that, look at it and they're like, well, man, you dodged a bullet, you're lucky, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I get it. But for me, man, I was in it. I was there when they were born. Like, like anybody that's had kids and you're there when a baby's born and you see them and you hold them and you touch them. And like, when that's, something that you really, really want and it's important to you, it makes you feel different. And regardless of who it's with. And, you know, I had made a decision to be committed to her and be committed to the babies and, you know, and be a dad. And, you know, to have that taken away from you like that, and to not only have it taken away from you, but to think about like the, how misled you were and betrayed, and the betrayal, like, I don't know. I don't know that there's anything worse that you can do to a man other than maybe kill someone in his family. And I obviously struggled with it. And when I say struggled with it, man, I was not in a good place, you know. I'll talk about it. I was, you know, I got suicidal. I got depressed. It was very tough. And, you know, I moved back to Iowa, and my parents, and with them, because I didn't, you know, I feel like I needed to be around, you know, family and stuff at that time. And, you know, I tried to block it out as much as I could and act normal, but dude, it was just this constant cloud over my head, and just constant sadness, and just constant ruminating about, you know, who's the dad? Like, I had all these questions that weren't answered, you know, and you have this person that you're madly in love with that, granted, yeah, they were terrible to you and did all these terrible things, but all of a sudden this is how it ends, just this abruptly. And it's just like, it was a lot. And long story short, I tried to go back to the one thing that gave me structure and everything, which was bodybuilding. And, you know, I think if I didn't have bodybuilding, you know, I don't know if I'd be alive, to be honest. And I came back, and, you know, I'm like, I did the USAs again the next year. I wasn't mentally healthy. And when you're not mentally healthy, I think you can do everything you're supposed to do, but you're not going to look as good as you normally would. It just doesn't happen. And I ended up getting third, which isn't terrible, but obviously I didn't win. And then from there, you know, basically from 2017 until this year, you know, I've battled, you know, those thoughts. And, you know, even since then, you know, I've talked to that person, and I've seen that person. I've, you know, I've even gone as far to completely forgive her, and, you know, offered to, you know, maybe, you know, for us to be a family, because I couldn't get those kids out of my head, man. And, obviously, you know, she hasn't changed at all. It's the same thing, but, regardless, you know, I guess I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm sorry. I'm getting kind of sidetracked, but, from there, I guess we'll kind of stick with bodybuilding. I tried to do, so I got third at the 2018 USAs, and I guess we'll get into, that's when I met Matt Jansen. I mean, I had talked to him, you know, we knew who each other were, you know, but we weren't friends. We didn't really chat. But we started talking a little bit after he saw what happened to me with the kids and stuff. Matt's somebody that, he's like me. He's, you know, sentimental. He's emotional. Things like that bother him when he sees it. He doesn't like, you know, I think for the most part, I have a pretty good reputation in the industry. People, you know that I'm a good, you know, consider me a good person. And he saw that happen, and he's just like, man, you know, he wrote to me and just said that, you know, man, my heart, it just hurts for you. I'm sorry, man. And, so we started becoming friends, and he got third at that show. I got third, and we had breakfast the next morning. And, he's like, you know, I'd love to help you get this done, because he's someone that, you know, there's people that do bodybuilding for the Instagram, and they do it for whatever. He knew that I did it. He knew how important it was to me, and everything that I had, you know, kind of been through, and what a long road it was. And that means a lot to Matt. Matt wants to help people like that have, you know, have a story like that, and have been, you know, been through some shit. And, so from there, we just decided to work together, and, we were going to do the Nationals that year. And, that was the year Hunter Labrada won. And I had told Matt, like, I think we should probably drop down to heavyweight to avoid Hunter because I'm not going to beat Hunter, you know? And he's like, why? He goes, why don't we just have the rebound of your life and let's go beat him? And I was just like, wow, you know, like this guy thinks completely different than me. And going back to having a coach that, you know, for the first time that was going to instill that in my brain, like, hey, like, that's not how you should operate in your brain. That's not what people that win do, you know? That meant a lot to me. So we started preparing for that. And 10 weeks out of that show, I fully ruptured my left bicep tendon. And it wasn't training. It was messing with the garage door at Armbrust in Denver. So that, you know, obviously was a huge kick in the nuts because I'm like, man, I'm going through this again. And I looked crazy too. I was 260 and the best I'd ever looked. And I don't know if I would have beaten Hunter, probably not, but I definitely would have been second at that show and been a pro by now. And we'd have a different conversation. But I get surgery, get that reattached, come back for 2019. And me and Matt are getting ready for the 2019 Nationals. 10 weeks out of that, so almost basically a year to the day, I rupture my right bicep tendon completely. And that was dragging a couch into the house. So none of them were training. Neither of those were training. And after that, man, I was just distraught because I'm just like, I'm done. This is it. You know, I'm 34 and ruptured both biceps, a pec. I had, you know, I tore an adductor that year too. And it's just like, my body's done. And I thought it was completely over. And long story short, I was with I had met another woman at that time that I don't even want to get into that. That turned out to not be what I thought it was going to be. But that was also a difficult time. And then I ended up not having really anywhere to go. I was in Denver with her, and I ended up basically a couple clients. COVID hit. I had a gym at the time. COVID hit. I had to wasn't doing anything. I was a strength coach at a high school that closed. And so luckily I had friends there that took me in, and I was staying there, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. And Matt called me, good old Matt. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know, man. He's like, well, why aren't you coaching people full time? And I'm like, I just feel like I've been gone for too long, and I'm so behind on like Instagram and everything that, you know, people don't like know who I am. And I don't know. He's like, well, you know, just come on board with me and, you know, we'll get you rolling. And so I said, okay. And then a couple months later, he said, hey, I'm actually going to move to Florida because it makes more sense to be there, being part owner of Revive and Raw and everything. I don't want to force you to do anything, but you should maybe think about moving down there. And I thought about it for a little bit, and I thought, why not? You know, why not? And I moved down here December of 2020. December of 2021. No, wait. Yeah, December of 2020. Yeah, So I moved down here December 2020. I've been here a year now, a little over a year. And this is going to get a lot more positive now. It's just the way my life has turned around in just 1 year. Absolutely crazy. We did, you know, I obviously most people know by now, I came back from all that and did the Nationals 3 weeks ago. And although I didn't win, you know, I got third, and that's the fourth time now I've missed my pro card by one spot. And I was a little bit upset, obviously, but I got over it really fast because I had to put it in perspective, the injuries, the time away. With that, I still achieved the best look I've ever had by far, which is also another point. Just because you miss your pro card, you get second or whatever place you get, it doesn't mean anything for the following year, because the look I had would have demolished the look I had in 2017. I would have easily beat Patrick, you know, if I had this look. So that just goes to show kind of how that doesn't matter. I went against two guys that were really, really good. Carlos is going to be a top pro. If he wants to be, Nate Spear kind of has, a similar story to me, and someone that I've been friends with for a while and greatly respect. And we have a mutual respect for each other for sure. And, he's been knocking at the door for the last 4 years, and, I've been on the couch. So, I can't be upset about it. I lost to 2 great competitors, 2 good guys that deservedly beat me. And, I'm optimistic now though, because, where my mind is now, and, my body feels pretty good, luckily. And, as long as, I stay injury free this year, I feel like I'm going to come back to nationals this year. And I have this confidence about me that I've never had. And I'm down here, obviously, with all of these amazing people that I've become close with, and I have them to support me, and everything is just different. My whole mind's different. So
I want to, before we talk a little bit more about, future plans of competing, Matt, I want to talk about your mindset. Okay. Cause I mean, we all know that mindset is everything in bodybuilding. Mindset is everything in life. And you just said you're at a place right now that you've never been or haven't been for a long time in terms of mentally, right? So talk about the mental shift that has happened in your life since you've moved down to Florida. Talk about Matt Jansen's influence on that mental shift, because nobody except for you and I know that we, I don't know, it was probably 6 or 7 months ago, recorded a podcast for my other podcast. I lost the audio. It got messed up, but I remember back then, 6 or 7 months ago, you just talking about how much and how impactful Matt Jansen was for you beginning that transformation, right? That was even before you competed in your qualifying show. And this, I think this was like maybe May or June of 2021, but now you're in a completely different place. So talk about Matt's influence on your mind shift, and just talk about what that mind shift actually looks like and where your mind is currently.
Dude, I mean, when we talked back then, obviously I had turned the corner, which, you can't do any of this. When I first moved, it's not like I didn't just move here and everything was great. I moved here and I was still not okay, man. Like, I was waking up every morning, still having panic attacks, vomiting every morning, having very, very bad anxiety, still depressed, still hard to get out of bed. The difference is I had Matt, I had Nick, that I had to show up every day, and me and Nick trained together for a while, and it forced me to, I would show up to a lot of those workouts basically on no food, because I would be thrown up in the morning, but it gave me somewhere to be. And it, over time, and what it ended up happening is you just keep showing up, and kind of all of those, you just kind of change and you don't even notice it. And, I didn't tell Matt a lot of this stuff, but he knew. I mean, he could tell, like, I wasn't like, and I have to thank him for being patient, because he knew, I didn't come here and just start kicking ass. Like, I came here and this just gradually got out of my funk, and him and I didn't really have a conversation about it. It wasn't really spoken. But the biggest shift is he was, and I think he did this strategically. I haven't asked him, but he started to tell me, hey, you should just start coming into the office and we'll just work side by side. When I started doing that, because as a coach, people think, oh, you can just work from home and blah, blah, blah. Once I started going into the office every day and spending 6, 7, 8 hours with him, that's when things really, really took off. And like I said, we didn't talk about it. I wasn't like, oh man, I'm not okay. But just being around him and just watching him and observing him, Matt has a certain confidence and aura about him that, even though he's become my best friend, I will never cross a line with him as far as disrespect him. you know, a lot of people like have to like be careful with like the coach friend relationship, because that can kind of get muddy once you become too friendly. With him, I don't have to worry about it, because I will never, ever, ever. He is what he says he is. He is no phony. He is just somebody that is a family man that he walks the walk, you know, and he doesn't talk. He doesn't talk the talk. He just walks the walk. And he's somebody that you observe and you just see how he handles things. And I mean, yeah. I mean, he saved my life. Yeah. And, you know, I've told him that. So, you know, he made me part of his family. And, yeah.
It's good, man. Just you do what you got to do. I appreciate it, Matt. It's beautiful, dude. It's real life, you know?
Yeah. So I'm forever indebted to that man. So, you know, and it's like, he didn't have to do any of that, you know, like, but he saw something in me that, you know, he didn't give up on me. And that means so much to me that I would never, ever, I'm in a place now where it's like, someone sticks their neck out for you like that and gives you a chance, like, you better not fucking blow it, you know? So that's where it's at. That's where I'm at in my head.
Cool, man. I love it. So let's just touch on a little bit more your prep leading up to nationals. Cause if I remember right, you competed in a show to qualify for nationals, right? Earlier in the year.
Yeah. And it went terrible. I didn't win the overall.
Well, let's just, I don't want to really talk about that, because we've talked about, I just want to focus on the really positive stuff. So once you wrapped up that show, talk about the rest of the prep leading up to nationals. Then how did that kind of go? Things didn't go the way you wanted them to at that show, but how did you kind of like get yourself gathered together and then just move forward to have a very successful nationals in 2021?
Yeah. So what happened was, I think that going back to, you know, I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I was pushing harder than I've ever pushed in my life, but my body just wasn't coming around. And part of it was I just didn't have the muscle back yet, because I was off away for so long. But the biggest part of it was mentally, I wasn't okay up to that point, because that was July. So like January through July, I mean, I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, but mentally I just wasn't still there. I was still not happy, I guess. And if you're not happy, it makes things difficult. And honestly, man, what happened is, I'm just going to be completely transparent. In July, so I was going to do the USAs, but I talked with Matt and I'm like, man, maybe I'll win looking like this, but probably not. I just don't like how I look, and I don't want to go do the show when I don't like how I look. This is not what I envisioned. And so he agreed, and I was like, but I do think that we can rebound, because I'm at a point where, I think we can put on some tissue and then come back down and do nationals. And I think we can achieve a look that I'll be happy with. And he agreed. But what really happened was, what really turned it around for me is actually the weekend of USAs, I went and saw that person that I was telling you about that had the kids. I went and saw her, and it was okay. It went okay. But I realized it gave me some closure, because I realized I had a new life. And I came back to Florida after that. And I think after that, I was finally able to put that to bed. And I mean, after that, things just clicked. And you can see it. If you scroll back on my Instagram, you can see my body from the posts that I make from July on. It it came back, and everything we did worked. I did a rebound, and I didn't really even gain that much weight, but my body just came back to life. I got my fullness back, my roundness back, my 3D look that makes me who I am as a good bodybuilder back. And then, you know, when we brought me down, it was easy. I mean, it wasn't easy physically, but it was easy on paper, you know, to manipulate things. And my body just did everything we wanted it to do. And with that, it just, you know, we achieved a look that I have never had. Conditioning was always my Achilles heel in the past. It was always, you know, you need to be harder, be harder, be harder. And this year, that was not the case. You know, people were just like, wow, you were so dry and hard. And I'm not used to hearing that. So I was just like, really? Like, whoa, you know. And then I talked to Steve, you know, Weinberger after, and he's like, yeah, just be bigger. Like, your conditioning was on point. It's just be bigger. And to hear that was just, this is the first show I've ever done where I've looked back at stage shots and I've been happy with it, you know, because I was like, you know, we figured it out. Because my body's also tricky, because the harder you push it, like some people look okay when they're flat. I don't. I look worse when I'm flat. And with bodies like that, it gets tricky, because you have to push and pull and figure out the right ratio of pushing and pulling. And then peaking is also difficult for me with water. But man, I tell you what, me and Matt figured it out. And I think between the two of us putting our heads together, I don't think there's anything we can't figure out bodybuilding wise, but we figured it out. So I'm very optimistic, but that's the truth of what happened.
Love it, man. So let's talk a little bit about the entire experience of nationals this year. I've had like all the dudes that placed ahead of you, had somebody that placed right behind you on the podcast, and I it's just fun for myself. It's fun for the listeners and the subscribers, Matt. So because this is kind of like this is like a redemptive show, right? This is a part of your redemptive comeback story. So talk about, you know, you're looking good going into nationals. Talk about prejudging. I know Nate Spears said from prejudging to finals, it was like 8 hours or something, dude, like something crazy. But just talk about once you stepped off a stage from prejudging. I mean, how were you feeling? I mean, talk about some of the feedback that you got. Talk about your 7 or 8 hour wait till the night show, and then just talk about wrapping up the entirety of that day in that competition for us.
Well, I got off stage, and, you know, I knew obviously I've been doing this long enough, you know, in the call outs, you know, where you stand. I knew I was in third immediately, just based on, you know, where they had everybody. And obviously Matt's not, you know, he's not going to blow smoke up my ass. He's like, yeah, you're in third. And I asked him, I'm like, do you think there's anything we can do to beat Nate? You know, I knew Carlos was going to win. I knew Nate was in second. I looked back at the photos, and even when I look at the photos, I'm like, yeah, I was a little flat at prejudging. That was the only thing, because I actually got really sick Thursday before, and I was having a hard time eating, and come to find out, I mean, I'm sure I probably had COVID. I didn't end up getting tested. I shouldn't say that, but I went back home for Christmas on Monday, and got my whole family sick. But it started on Thursday before the show, so I was having a hard time eating. So I was flat at prejudging, and the time between was good for me, because I came back at night fuller, and I was just really honestly hoping that they were, maybe it was, you know, we're going to rejudge us at night. That was kind of my thoughts. They didn't end up doing it. I was okay with it either way, because I honestly, and this isn't to say I don't want people that do get second place pro cards to take this a bad way, but I want to get mine by winning. And, you know, like I said, no disrespect to anybody else, but that's just kind of my mind. So I wasn't really that upset about it, me getting third. Like you said, it was bigger than just, for me, the show was bigger than just, you know, where I was falling in the placement. So I was happy with it. But that's honestly where my head was at, was, okay, is there anything we can do to overcome this and beat Nate? And Matt's like, probably not. And I'm like, well, probably not too, after I look at the photos, because I still look thin in a lot of shots. He looked, you know, he had a pro level physique, and I was just shy of him. So that's where my head was at. And, they didn't rejudge us. When they didn't rejudge us, I knew I was going to get third that night. And, I was totally okay with it because, like I said, I was happy with how I looked, which was most important. And I was happy to be back. And it was, what was also cool was it was a really good show. I mean, there was a lot of guys, and I think our class was really good. There was a lot of really good guys. That all of the class winners were phenomenal. So overall, man, it was a really, really good nationals, and it was a good showing for me and good comeback. So, I'm not upset at all. I'm excited for this year because I do feel like for the first time, I would have said in the past, I didn't like being a favorite, but I'm totally okay with it now. Like I just have a different feeling about myself, and I'm totally comfortable saying that, December 3rd of this year, that as long as everything goes as planned, I don't think anybody will beat me. And it's not being cocky. It's that's just how I feel.
You know what? Nick Walker, speak it into existence, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, if someone does come out and beat me, they're gonna have to be really, really damn good. I'll say that. So, that's where we're at. We got, basically almost a full year. We got this full year to get ready for it. And being down here another year, I mean, just seeing what happened. I mean, not even with the full year, man, really, if you think about it, from July to now, I mean, it's been 5-6 months. So to see what happens in 12 months, I've never been so optimistic in it. And honestly, it feels kind of weird because I'm not used to feeling this way. So I'm kind of like, well, shit, what's going to happen? Like, I'm like kind of like waiting for something to go wrong. So now I'm kind of like, I have to get that out of my head,
So we're gonna kind of start wrapping it up here, Matt.
Yeah.
Earlier, when I asked you about some of the current pros that you kind of respect or look up to or what have you, you mentioned how similar you found out that you and Ian are. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? And then also, just for the sake of all of us fans, all of us bodybuilding junkies, obviously you've trained with Nick Walker. A lot of the listeners and subscribers to this podcast are younger. They really look up to Nick. So once you kind of talk about Ian and kind of your guys' connection, talk about Nick. What has he maybe brought to you in terms of just maybe helping you with your mindset or just some observations that you've made being around him as a champion bodybuilder?
Yeah, I'll talk about Ian first because I don't know Ian as well as, I'm not as close with Ian as I am with Nick, but Ian is somebody, obviously I knew a lot about him just from watching him on YouTube and stuff. And when I met him, I was like, oh, hey, Ian, I'm Matt. I know you don't know me. He goes, yeah, I do. And I'm like, oh, you do? And he goes, oh, yeah. And I'm like, well, I know you, and I know that we're very similar. So we're basically going to be friends. And he laughed. And, that's kind of how that started. But just, I've heard him talk about, and even more recently, I didn't know. He didn't really talk about like his thing with depression and anxiety until after he moved here. And then I saw that and I was like, holy shit, man, we have a lot in common, and he, was talking about how he just started taking an SSRI and how it changed his life. And it did the same for me when I was right after high school. I started taking an SSRI, mostly for anxiety, not depression. I hadn't really had depression at that point in my life, but I had anxiety really bad. It was so bad. That's, why I didn't go play college football. I couldn't leave my house, which is a whole nother story, but it changed my life too. And so, him and I think we even, we speak similar. I think that we both have similar, mannerisms, we kind of don't have a filter. We kind of just share what's on our mind and deal with the repercussions of it later. If people don't like it, we don't really care. So we're very, very similar in that sense that we're, I guess, just straightforward and honest and straight shooters, but we also deal with the same, there's other things I know about him that I won't talk about on here, but there's things that we're just very, very similar, and it's very weird, but very cool. And Nick, man, Nick has taught me I've always known what I needed to do to be a good bodybuilder, but I've never actually seen it in front of my eyes. And being around him and watching him, how he executes and how he goes about his day and how he just doesn't let anything bother him. He's just kind of like, whatever. And just watching somebody do what he did. I mean, having literally a front row seat to watching what is possibly the greatest rookie year that a bodybuilder has ever had, winning the New York Pro and winning the Arnold, less than a year turning pro is absolutely crazy. And to see it happen and to see everything that went into it behind the scenes, it did a couple things for me. One, it made me realize, like, I'm not that different from these people. I am one of these people. So that helped, but just, seeing how he carried his mind, he would text me, I would say, oh man, hopefully I can do this. Hope I can do that. He's like, man, fuck that. You're going to win. Like, what do you mean? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Get that out of your head, So he's been really, really good for me just to just change my mindset and do being more, positive and speaking things into existence and, just believing in yourself. He's been very instrumental in that by, talking and observing and watching him.
Very cool, Matt. Outside of bodybuilding, Matt, what do you like to do, man? Are you into music? I know you said you, at least you used to really be into drawing. What do you kind of do just to check out of bodybuilding for a little downtime?
I listen to music nonstop. I'm on a Polo G kick. I'm obsessed with Polo G. I'm making everybody listen to him. And I actually feel cool. I'm like the oldest one here, and like people don't like, Nick's young, Chris is young, Ian's young. Like they're all young, and I'm Chris is like a fucking grandpa that listens to his go-to is Ja Rule. So, I'm like introducing him. I'm the old guy, but I'm introducing him to the younger music. I'm obsessed with music. So I'm always listening to music, sports, especially football, Iowa Hawkeye football. I'm obsessed with. I think I want to become rich so I can simply become an Iowa Hawkeye booster and see if we can get us a national title someday. But Iowa Hawkeye football, NFL football, basketball, baseball, sports, coaching, Matt and I have so many clients. It's hard to really find a lot of time to really do anything. Honestly, I basically work from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to bed, after you get your normal, you still have to run errands and go to the gym and all the other stuff. So it's not like I have a lot of time to like really like do stuff, which I'm totally fine with because I don't like doing stuff anyways. I'm essentially living my dream right now, and that's the truth. I love what I'm doing. And I'm just lucky to be around all these people, like to be around. I mean, shit, man, people would kill to be me right now. So I'm just kind of taking it all in.
And you should, man, because I don't know where you're at in terms of faith or anything, but man, like my perspective is like God has just given you, man, like what an opportunity, right? Like, I mean, it's just like it's amazing. I know we kind of went into it a little bit on our last chat 6 or 7 months ago, and even more so now, man. It's just like Chris has moved down there now, and Ian, so it's really great. So I want to kind of ask you, Matt, I've got a few fun Iowa questions I want to ask you to close out the podcast. But before I ask you those questions, just kind of like, I don't know if you've had a lot of time to kind of look back on this last year, or if you're very reflective. I think you probably are pretty introspective, but just kind of looking back, maybe on the last year, maybe looking back over your lifetime. What do you feel like, man? Like, what's the overall lesson? If you could just share something with myself, with the listeners, maybe some of the younger people that are just kind of getting into bodybuilding, whether it's a life lesson or bodybuilding lesson, what do you want to share with us in terms of like, man, this is something that looking back on my life, like I've really learned this. I've really come into my own in terms of maybe this one thing or two things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson, I think the best thing for anyone that most people lack that aren't where they want to be in life is they just don't have self-awareness. I think people have a really hard time being honest with themselves. I think everybody thinks that they work hard, but a lot of people don't even know what hard work is like what I notice a lot from clients and other people that I deal with. I think people just aren't honest with themselves, and they don't ever look at themselves in the mirror. And, there's a lot of delusionality and just a complete lack of self-awareness. Like, you need to really dig deep, and have people just avoid critical thinking, I think, altogether, because they're too distracted. That's the way our society is set up, in the Western world. But I think people are just so distracted. They never really dig deep into their own brain, and they don't even know who they are. And they don't know what they want. They're just kind of floating through life, just, doing whatever. And you got to find something that you're passionate about. Life isn't easy for everybody. Life is hard. But you have to find something that you're passionate about that makes you want to go through all the shit and keeps you going. And whatever that is, whatever you're passionate about, man, go all in on it. And, you need to make a plan, to get there, and then you need to execute it. And you can't be wavered by other people. I think a lot of people that want to be successful are tethered down by the people closest to them, whether it be your parents or a significant other or a best friend or all of the above. I think they listen to them too much to put limits on themselves. You got to just first figure out who you are. And then once you figure that out, figure out what you want. And then once you figure that out, think about what you're good at. And then once you figure that out, think about what you're bad at. And then, make a plan and then execute it. And then you can't depend on other people to do anything for you. Do things yourself. You can't find happiness in other people. Be alone. I spent the last, I recognized from my past, looking back, I was very codependent and always had a girlfriend. And, I've spent the last 2 years after what happened to me completely alone. And that's the greatest thing I could have done. If you are someone going through depression, I would say my best advice is to be alone. Don't drink, don't do drugs, don't find an outlet. I mean, find an outlet for it, but don't find an unhealthy outlet that masks the pain. I think you got to feel it. I just felt it and I took it. And eventually, if you find something that you love doing and you stick to it, and it eventually goes away. It does. It's just, you have to have the patience. You have to have the perseverance to just continue to go through it, and don't reach out to don't just go find another person and, find and let that be your happiness, because it's never going to get solved. If you need to get a therapist, I got a therapist this year. I talked to her and she helped me figure some things out. You just do what you got to do to be mentally healthy, and then, set goals, and then go fucking do it. And then you just don't, I just don't fucking quit. If I want to be known for anything, it's just, I don't fucking quit. I think I've had, a lot of things happen to where, I probably should have quit, but I didn't. So that would be it.
Perfect, Matt. Okay. You ready for just a couple, 2, 3, 4 fun Iowa questions?
Yeah.
All right. We'll see how Iowan you are. So first question, high V or fairway?
Fairway for me, high V for mostly everything else.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Best pizza in Iowa, is it Casey's or Pizza Ranch?
Casey's by a mile. The second best is Northern Lights. You've probably never had it because it's only in Des Moines. Northern Lights. I've
heard about it. I've never had it, but you are a true Iowan because you answered that question right. The best pizza in Iowa, or I don't know if it is still, but when we were growing up, for sure, best pizza in Iowa, hands down, was Casey's. And for everybody that has no idea what we're talking about, Casey's is actually it's a very popular gas station in Iowa in the Midwest, but they used to at least have the best pizza. So you're definitely a true Iowan, Matt.
And specifically Casey's taco pizza.
I don't know if I've ever had that, but it sounds good.
You're not a true Iowan.
Dude, I haven't had pizza for a long time, but okay. So next one, I think we all kind of already know this, but Hawkeyes or Cyclones?
Oh yeah, Hawkeyes. I will say I do root for the Cyclones if they're not playing Iowa. I'm not a Cyclone hater by any means.
All right, we kind of already knew that because you already brought up the Hawkeyes earlier. But all right, yeah. So finish this quote or statement. If you build it,
it will come.
They will come. Yeah.
They will come.
What movie is that from, Matt?
Field of Dreams.
Okay. All right. Good deal, man. All right. Yeah. Last one. This is tough. If somebody asked me this, I wouldn't have got it right. I had to look it up. I wanted to try to stump you a little bit, but do you know what the state bird is for Iowa?
It's not a Hawkeye. It's a damn. When you say it, I'm gonna know it. What is it?
It's a goldfinch, eastern goldfinch.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten that either. It's all good. All right, dude. So that's kind of the conclusion, Matt. I want to give you the opportunity. You kind of already said your last words, but if there's anything else that you feel like that's on your heart, man, or in your soul that you kind of want to share with us in closing, you can go ahead and do that now. Also, any sponsors or any personal shout outs, anything like that, man, share that with us, and then I'll close us out.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to thank, there's some people I didn't mention their names. I just want to make sure I mention their names. Like my best friend, Tavish Steele, you should probably have him on here. He's been my best friend since, 2009-ish. He's helped me get through a lot. Obviously my parents, my brother, Dom Icavone here, that is the owner of Revive, and his wife, Sammy. They've, just to give us this opportunity. I mean, they're pioneers at what they're doing, and bringing everybody here, and the way that everything is set up here. I've gotten very close with them. There's so many people, but yeah, Revive, MD, I'm with, obviously the supplement line, the health supplements, and then Get Raw Nutrition that we have here for all of the sports line. That's basically it, man. I think that I probably I probably said enough already, so I'll just shut up now. People are probably, and this guy doesn't stop talking.
No, it's good, Matt. I know that there's been a lot of people on my side that are waiting for this. We tried to set it up when you're back in Iowa. There was a snowstorm, and it's just like, dude, anyways. Yeah. But thank you very much, Matt, for coming on, man, and sharing your story. I appreciate it. Okay.
Of course, man. Anytime.
Cool. All right. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much for listening and watching whatever you're doing. I just appreciate your continued support, because if it wasn't for you, the podcast wouldn't exist. And I want to thank all of you who have been patiently waiting for Matt's episode, for me to get Matt on. Like I said earlier, 6 or 7 months ago on another podcast that I used to have, I had Matt on. I lost the audio. That's not going to happen this time, but everything I believe happens for a reason. So thank you for being patient. And this is definitely a very impactful conversation. And I just want to ask you guys, as we wrap this conversation up, 2 things. If you haven't done so already, make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe to Behind the Muscle podcast on YouTube. That's really important, because I release all these episodes first on YouTube, and then I distribute them to the other podcast platforms. So if you want to stay on top with all the episodes that I'm releasing, all these awesome conversations with top athletes and coaches that I'm having on Behind the Muscle, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube so that you can stay on top of all of that. And then just one last favor I'd ask of all of you, as Matt's really opened up, been very transparent, shared his story, would you guys please take this episode of Behind the Muscle and share it on your Instagram stories? Make sure you tag Matt, and make sure you tag Behind the Muscle, so that we know that you listen to this episode specifically and found great value in it. And it's really important that you guys share this episode, or whatever episode that you really appreciate and value in terms of Behind the Muscle, because that's the way that more people are going to find the podcast, more people are going to listen, and more people are going to be positively impacted. And that's really the desire of my heart, is that these athletes open up on this podcast. They share their story. We get behind the muscle. These coaches share their stories, and people are going to listen, and people are going to be positively impacted. We all love great stories. We all love getting behind the curtain, behind the scenes, and behind the muscle. So make sure you share this episode on your Instagram stories. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.